She has tried to dismiss this notion that to be a philanthropist you have to be rich, but rather to be a philanthropist you have to be generous of heart. And even if it's a few dollars, it's meaningful, because if everybody contributes a few dollars, it amounts to something really important.
Deborah is one of those remarkable persons who works behind the scenes to get significant things done. She doesn't need to have her name in lights. She doesn't have to be at the center of the stage. But if important things are happening, you can bet she's somewhere in the mix.
DebraJacobs Bataji was born Deborah Ann McQuaig on November 11, 1950, to Francis and Virginia McQuaig in Rochester, New York.
My mother loves to remind me that I was a breech birth, so it wasn't necessarily an easy process, but hopefully it's been worthwhile over the years for her.
Her father was a foreman for Eastern Kodak. However, his primary focus was on his family, especially her mother.
His license plate was called Mo and Me. Mo was the nickname he had for my mother. In fact, we all call my mother Mo rather than Mom or Mommy or Mother. So their partnership was really top priority to them.
Deborah was the oldest of 4 sisters. For her father, his work was his responsibility. His family was his passion. Vacations were an important part of the family bonding.
Not expensive vacations because we weren't high net worth family, but it was important for us to have experiences. So camping was very important to us. I'm talking about in tents around campfires. We were members of the National Campers and Hikers Association, so the outdoors was very important.
The outdoor life was not Deborah's passion. She would much prefer to read.
My dad would quite frequently say to me, "Deborah, get your nose out of that book and get out there and play." So while we were outdoors, I really enjoyed reading a lot, and he would want me to get out there and play instead.
Deborah's mother was a people person, and she would make it a point to make her relationships with others a priority. She noticed early that Deborah was quite an organizer.
She was always separating things, organizing things, like her toys. Certain ones would be in one corner and so on and so forth. And then when her other sisters came, she'd organize their things. If they were in a playpen, she'd organize what corner they could have there.
As the family grew to 4 girls, Deborah was the older sister and the family organizer. However, her talent in this area was not always appreciated. In fact, her parents insisted on her being in bed by 7 p.m. each night.
My mother would always say to me, "Deborah, you really need to go to bed early because you need your sleep." And I just found it very interesting that my 3 younger sisters were staying up and playing. And I actually think it was because I might have been trying to organize everybody what they should do instead of letting them just enjoy themselves. So what has actually ended up happening, I have to go to bed early at night. I have gone a little bit past 7 o'clock, and now I go to bed at 9 o'clock, the bewitching hour.
Deborah loved school. She attended kindergarten through 12th grade at Spencerport Central School. The early grades through 5th were some of her most memorable.
I liked all of them because there were so many different new things you could explore all the time, and that was really super fun for me.
In high school, Deborah was determined to get a job. She could not get a work permit until she was 16. While she was a prim and proper young woman, she was not afraid of hard work. One summer, she had an opportunity to take a job in the great outdoors, picking berries. She would start early each morning and worked until late at night and earned 10 cents a pint.
I will tell you that raspberries have thorns. And so when I would go home at night, absolutely dirty and scratched, and I can remember sinking into the bathtub at night and having the water go into where the scratches were, it was painful.
At 16, she obtained her work permit. She was determined to get a job at the nicest department store in Rochester, Sibley, Lindsay, and Kerr. It was her plan to be at the store filling out her application on her 16th birthday.
What is challenging about that? November 11th is holiday shopping time where they're hiring hundreds of people, and it's like, what if they don't hire me? I have to get hired. I've been waiting for this day.
She got the job and was a model employee. Deborah did not drive, so she took a Greyhound bus the 11 miles each way from Spencerport to Rochester to work every Tuesday and Thursday nights and on Saturday. She would continue to work at Sibley's through high school and during summers in college. When she was 18, she was put in charge of the designer dress department.
And I thought, I'm really learning all kinds of things about style and fashion and labels and how to do things the right way. So I was very, very fortunate to work there.
When Deborah wasn't working at Sibley's, she could be found working at Fisher's Dairy Store on Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday. In addition to selling milk, bread, and other items, she would scoop ice cream for the patrons.
You had to not only scoop ice cream, you had to make milkshakes. In fact, that's actually how the person that I ended up marrying, he would come in and order vanilla milkshakes.
That young man's name was Paul Jacobs. Those milkshake orders would blossom into romance, and soon Deborah and Paul were going steady. She and Paul would be attending her senior ball, and her parents made it a special event, taking her and her sisters to New York City to buy her dress. Attending the prom would be a special event for Deborah, but she wanted to make sure no one was left out and performed as matchmaker for all those who did not have a date.
We actually had a party at our house for all the couples that I matchmake. Now, none of them got married, none of them ended up dating or anything, but for that one night, every single girl was a princess and had a date, and it was just kind of fun to watch the excitement as that came together.
Deborah was involved in a variety of extracurricular activities. She joined Future Teachers of America, Chorus, was in the senior play, and served as the editor of her senior yearbook.
The attention to detail that you had to do as you were proofreading every single page, because every person's picture in that yearbook, that's what they're going to go look at, and you want to make sure that you've got the correct spelling of their name and their name associated to where they are in the picture. So it was a beautiful training ground for understanding. It doesn't matter how super cool the idea is, the magic's in the detail.
She graduated from Spencerport Central School in 1968 and was the salutatorian. She and the valedictorian were each to give a speech at graduation. It was a day Deborah would never forget.
The valedictorian was also the co-editor of the yearbook, and when we showed up for the big day, she was a short, petite, very attractive person, and I was about 5'7", and we both showed up with the exact same dress on.
Deborah started college at SUNY Potsdam in upstate New York. After one semester, she transferred to Utica College, where her boyfriend was attending. At Utica, she majored in business and economics. As Paul was ahead of her by a year, Deborah took an accelerated course to complete her degree in 3 years. She would take summer courses at State University of New York at Brockport in Spencerport to meet this goal. During her senior year at Utica, Paul and Deborah were married.
We were extremely poor. Even though our tuition was paid, we had student loans. I can remember us flipping to see who was going to carry the quarter that week. So we really had to stretch our pennies, but we were very happy, we were in love, and it seemed the right thing to do at the right time.
She graduated from Utica College of Syracuse University, summa cum laude, with a Bachelor's of Science, combined major of Business Economics and Business Administration. In 1971, the economy was not doing well and jobs were scarce. A determined Deborah would not be denied. She attended job fairs and made the rounds wherever she could.
I felt like I had a low draft number because it was just tough to find a job. But I finally found Central Dress Company. I said to him, I don't even care what I do. If you will just hire me, I will prove to you you did not make a bad decision.
She got the job and became the first woman to enter the management training program at Central Trust. It was a structured program in which candidates spent time learning every department of the bank before receiving their job assignment.
When I'd get to the departments and I'd actually do the work of the people that were in the department, they'd go, don't you know you're a management trainee and you're just supposed to kind of look at us and lord it over us? I said, no, how am I going to learn what you're doing if I don't actually do the work with you? But it proved to be absolutely the right thing for me to do, because as I progressed up the ladder, I understood what the work was, so I would be able to identify what the challenges that people had on a day-to-day basis.
Deborah rose through the ranks, becoming Senior Vice President and Retail Division Administrator, overseeing consumer lending, operations, and retail. She was once again the only woman on the executive team.
The reality is I always had to work extra hard to be among equals. And that it didn't harm me because I was a hard worker anyway, but it was one of those reality things. But it was good because I kept learning from other people along the way.
She was also involved in the community, serving on the board of the Rochester Chamber of Commerce. Her work would have an impact upon her marriage. As part of the Irving Bank Corporation, her work had taken her into New York City, where she began to expand her business and cultural interests. By 1977, Deborah and Paul had grown in different directions. Deborah felt she needed a change.
When our divorce was final, I can remember crying for hours because I was sad to see that part of my life close, but I also knew it was the right thing for me to do because I needed to explore and stretch.
Deborah embraced her career, putting all of her energy into her work. She furthered her education, obtaining an MBA from the University of Rochester in 1981. She had found her life passion in her work and had no plans to marry again.
Every intent that I had was to be single the rest of my life because I saw all kinds of things I could do.
Her plan to remain single held strong for 5 years, until on one business meeting she encountered a businessman who she found to be different than the other men she had met. An associate, Tony Costanza, decided to teach her how to make a business call and took her on a call to his nephew, Bill Battagi's factory.
The business call never evolved because my uncle, who was single, and I, who was single, proceeded to talk about our activities the night before.
Tony and Bill proceeded to discuss all of the bars that they had gone to in the last week and how long those girls' legs were at the bars.
So Deborah thought that, well, this is a waste of my time.
A couple of years later, Tony invited Deborah to attend his wedding, and she and Bill reacquainted. By the end of the evening, Bill asked Deborah to meet him for lunch.
And that was the start of our monthly date.
About a year into their relationship, Bill took a look at Deborah's apartment and suggested he do a makeover.
And I said, oh, well, that'd be kind of fun. Yeah, why don't you do that? So for the next 6 months, he transforms my apartment into something that really should have been featured in a magazine. And at the end of the 6 months, where every piece of furniture, ceilings, window treatments are totally new, he asked me if I would like to get married.
So when I asked her to marry me, she said, well, why would I do that? I got this wonderful apartment to live in.
And he said, no, think about it. And I said, well, actually, yes. But isn't it a very clever man who can redecorate your whole apartment, and after you get married, every piece of furniture fits in his townhouse?
Bill had 2 children from a previous marriage, Alana and Bill II, then 10 and 11. Before getting married, Bill and Deborah wanted to get their approval.
The fact that I had the Good Housekeeping seal of approval from Alana and Bill meant absolutely the world to me.
Deborah and Bill married on May 27, 1983. Their wedding was a small, quiet affair.
We all agreed we weren't going to tell anyone until a week before the wedding, and then we told the immediate family that we were going to get married and they were going to be picked up in antique limousines, antique cars, bringing them to church for the wedding. Then we would go to a dinner afterwards.
The next day, they left for their honeymoon, a Western Caribbean cruise to Cancun, Cozumel, and Jamaica. It would be the first of many exotic trips the couple would take. On their way out of town, they mailed invitations for a reception to be held a month later.
The highlight of that was we had a local theater group put on a Gershwin review because theater is part of my DNA in terms of appreciating the magic that happens through live performances. In fact, even then and more so now, we have a rule in our family that I am not allowed to go to more than 2 live performances a week.
Deborah developed a close relationship with Bill and Alana. She became a friend and confidant, but did not try to be their mother.
Their mother did an extraordinary job raising them. We would have the kids on the weekend. She would have them during the week. but we would call, she was the real mom, and we didn't like the word stepmom, so we would call me the pretend mom. So I really was never maternal, but I was more like an older advisor, different kind of, I exposed them to different things than they did with their mom. Because theater was big, we would take them on different trips, different places. So it was a different dimension and relationship that we had together.
In 1985, Bill determined he was tired of shoveling snow and wanted to move to Florida. He shared his idea with Deborah, much to her chagrin.
And I thought, I don't think so. I wear wool very well. I like to go to New York City once a month with Irving Bank Corporation, and I'm really doing super cool things here in Rochester. I mean, they asked me to run for mayor one year while I was in Rochester.
Bill convinced her this was the best plan. He had found a buyer for his business and began to make plans to move south. Deborah wasn't about to be a retired housewife, and she began looking for opportunities in Florida. She answered an ad in American Banker for a similar position. Shortly thereafter, received a phone call from Charlie Murphy, then president of Sun Bank in Sarasota, Florida.
And the conversation's going in such a way like it's beyond the first interview. And I said to him, don't you think we should kind of talk this through like a get acquainted interview? He said, I know so much about you that I know not to call you Debbie. And I thought, oh my gosh. Well, it turns out that one of the guys I went through the management training program had relocated to Florida and was in Charlie's bank. So Charlie saw the resume, asked Bill Fox, and Charlie says, I already know that we're very interested in you.
With a job opportunity in Sarasota, Deborah was ready to make the move when Bill's deal to sell his business fell through. Deborah had made a commitment to Sun Bank, so she moved south and left Bill in Rochester to find another buyer. It would be 6 months before Bill was able to make the move, leaving Deborah in Sarasota alone.
So you kind of go, that was icky time because we only saw each other every 3 weeks. Didn't really like that too much. But it actually turned out for the better because you can't work 24/7. So that propelled me to get involved in Sarasota community. And that was an outstanding way for me to make connections and use the talents that I had to hopefully make a difference in Sarasota.
Deborah found Sun Bank to be a different experience than what she was used to.
I asked for the directory of the bank, and they gave me an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And I said, no, I'd like the directory of the whole bank. And they said, Deborah, this is the whole bank. So I had gone from a bank whose assets were about $500 million to a bank whose assets were less than $100 million.
Deborah worked diligently to become a part of the community, both professionally and personally. She co-founded what would become the Sun Trust Branch Management Academy. She later taught classes at the American Bankers Association's Stonier Graduate School of Banking, where she earned a degree in 1986. She graduated from the Leadership Sarasota program in 1987 and became involved with Greater Sarasota Chamber of Commerce, Sarasota County Committee of 100, along with a myriad of other professional and nonprofit organizations. In 1988, she was promoted to Senior Vice President of Sun Bank. She was frequently a part of many fundraising events and was always a good sport. At one event, she raised the most money by attendees voting for her to have the distinction of kissing a pig.
Deborah volunteered a great deal of her time within the organization, serving in our academies and our SunTrust University as the dean, as an instructor, in ways where she could make a difference for others.
She was also a part of the team that would see that small bank with $100 million in assets grow into Sun Trust Bank with $2 billion in assets. After 27 years in the banking industry, 14 in Rochester and 11 in Sarasota, Bill began to see that Deborah was missing the spark he knew so well.
He said, you're whining. And I said, well, it was just a bad day. He said, no, you whine all the time, and I want you to change your life so that you're happy. That is an incredibly scary thing, especially when you're a workaholic. So I had to figure out, am I happy or am I not happy? And I decided, no, actually, I don't think the magic's here anymore, so I really do need to do something different.
She narrowed down her options to becoming an entrepreneur, a consultant, or entering the nonprofit arena. Deborah continued to work 14 hours a day at the bank, but at night, she began to compile a booklet about herself and her talents. She and Bill took it to Kinko's and had it bound. She then sent the booklet to 6 friends and associates around the country she had met throughout her career. They all had great ideas for Deborah, but one stood out.
One of the guys that I sent it to, who was in succession planning in major corporations, he said, if I didn't know you were a banker, I wouldn't know it from your book. He said, I think you really should get into fundraising. And I'm like, fundraising? I've never raised any money. I don't know how to do that. But what interestingly happens when you're open-minded, but you're focused, I ended up with a job offer to join a small consulting firm in Atlanta. I was interviewing in Washington, D.C., and Ringling College of Art and Design offered me the position of Vice President of Institutional Advancement, which happens to be the fancy title for Thou Shalt Raise Money.
In 1996, she resigned from SunTrust Bank and began her new adventure at Ringling College of Art and Design. It would be a perfect fit for Deborah.
I loved being at Ringling College. It was a totally different atmosphere. I was learning new things, and the joy of philanthropy. I must have had a DNA gene on that because it came alive.
She was extremely happy in her work and planned to stay there the remainder of her career. However, as fate would have it, in 1997, the executive director of the William G. Selby and Marie Selby Foundation, Robert Perkins, died unexpectedly of a heart attack.
Many people said I should apply for the position, and I said, no, I'm very happy at Ringling. But I got lobbied pretty hard, so I sent in my book, and I said, all right, I'll send in my book and see what happens.
The board was impressed with Deborah's booklet and invited her to lunch for an interview. Halfway through lunch, she realized this was what she was meant to do.
Why? They wanted someone who would do 3 things. They wanted someone who would help them make the grants they want to make. What's a grant except a loan you don't have to pay back? Gosh, I used to be a banker. Okay, I can do that. They wanted someone who would be an impartial sounding board in a place that people who needed to talk could talk. And when you're the retail director of a banking organization, your life is a perpetual branch tour where you go and say to people, so how are the goals? What can I help you do so you can get there? And listening and bankers are always the ultimate confidential people. And number 3, they wanted someone who would work below the radar screen to help our community achieve its potential. And I thought, they want to pay me to do this? This is what I think I'm supposed to be doing anyway.
Deborah joined the William G. Selby and Marie Selby Foundation in May 1998. While at Selby, Deborah accomplished tremendous things for the community and helped countless organizations and programs. She also administered 8 other foundations in conjunction with her work at Selby. While at Selby, Deborah was a hands-on administrator who took the time to visit and learn about those she was considering for grants.
She would do site visits at all these nonprofits. She carried 3 different kinds of shoes in her trunk, depending on where she had to walk that day. There were days when she had to walk through mud.
One of her roles while at Selby was to function very much like the Dalai Lama or Dear Abby or Mother Confessor, that she was sort of a font of information and wisdom, and people all throughout Sarasota would come to her to drink from that water whenever they had a decision point.
Deborah was always insightful. She always asked the right questions. She was infamous for giving Selby money as a capping gift. So she made the organizations do the heavy lifting, and then she put the crown on the organization's achievement.
Time and again, when we were struggling with issues, she would come forward with some information that we didn't have and resolve the issue for us, but she never wanted any credit for it. And she, after she had made her contribution, she receded back into the background.
The most joyful part of what I do is working in ways that can inspire others to figure out their philanthropy, their legacy, where they can go. It doesn't matter what it is, it's that you have one. And so I always look for opportunities on where you can help people figure out what their legacies are.
In 2008, she was approached by attorney John Berto regarding a small foundation whose donor had just died, and the foundation was about to grow. He told her the foundation would hold about $200 million in assets.
I said, whoa, what are you going to do? This is big. You have to have a plan. You have to know what you're doing. So he said, well, that's why I wanted to get a little insight for you if you had any advice of what I should do. I said, the first thing you have to do is you have to go on field trips. You have to learn how foundations operate. You need to find out what the best and the brightest do out there.
With the blessing of the Selby Foundation Board, Deborah began to work with John, developing a plan and going on field trips to view other foundations throughout the southeastern United States. During one of those trips, John had a proposal for Deborah.
We were at the Duke Endowment, and John asked the CEO of the Duke Endowment to leave the room because he wanted to talk to me, and John said, "You do realize that we're going to work together, don't you?" And I said, well, I really hadn't, but I guess we're moving there, aren't we?
After much contemplation and prayer, and although she was happy at Selby, Deborah made the decision to work full-time with the Patterson Foundation, and in 2009 accepted the position of Chief Executive Officer and President of the Patterson Foundation.
The reason why Patterson was important and I had to do this, it wasn't because of the size. It actually was because of the immense responsibility that foundation had. I couldn't let it not do well. I didn't know all the answers, but I definitely knew how to ask questions and find the right way to do things to achieve a legacy that Mrs. Patterson would be proud of. So it was very much a responsibility. And once again, I'm pretty sure this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Beyond her work with the foundations Deborah has served, she has been an enthusiastic supporter of community organizations and the arts. Deborah devotes her personal volunteering to her church.
She has a servant's heart, and that servant's heart is rooted in her faith. And that servant's heart calls her to do that which is best for the community and that which is best for people. Meeting needs in this community, meeting the needs of people. That's her goal.
Well, I am a person that wakes up every morning and says, thank you very much. I've got one more day to use the gifts that you've given me.
We asked Deborah her advice for those who follow.
The world is an incredible place. If every day, every person did one new thing or one thing to help somebody else or one thing that made a difference, the energy in our world could be transformed. And my belief is that I hope in generations to come that people will always look at their opportunity and not let systems get them down, not let naysayers get them down, because if you strive for the possibilities, it is amazing the new realities that can be created.